The Eurozone is falling victim to contagion that I spoke of in the Money GPS, and today we will talk about the EU falling apart. It's time for QE in 2015. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into the euro falling to a 9-year low, Greece and ECB in focus. This article is out of Reuters, and what I would just like to discuss is the fact that the euro and the US dollar are falling in relation to real goods. But when you look at it, one versus another, you get this disparity that has been created. And the euro is undoubtedly weaker than the US dollar in many ways right now. And it is obviously on a decline as the US is on the incline. We look at structurally how none of these currencies are actually doing well, but you see them on a chart, and the mainstream media is able to manipulate that. Greece and ECB in focus. So we're going to talk today about Greece obviously being the big issue today, as yet again there's talk of them leaving. Let's go into this. Right here out of the Telegraph, we are in technical preparations to adjust the size, speed, and compositions of our measures, and of course by measures they mean QE, early 2015 should it become necessary to react to too long a period of low inflation. They're going to continue on with the low inflation as they call it, or deflation, and they're going to react by printing money. This is no different than any other central bank like Japan, like the US. When they see problems, they don't fix that problem. All they do is pump money and try to send it out into the economy. Of course, never worked, never will work. And, there's much more in this article, but I'd like to move on and basically explain what Mario Draghi is talking about. Germany believes Eurozone could cope with a Greece exit. So obviously, this is not true, but let's just get into the details. So we have the Eurozone set up with strong countries and with weaker countries, all on one interest rate and one currency. This right off the bat doesn't work. It can't work because the countries need an interest rate and need a currency that is valued at an appropriate level for that individual country. So right away you have a flawed design set up. But of course, the reason that they're doing this isn't to make any sense. It's to bring them closer together in order to break down those borders, destroy their sovereignty, and be able to manipulate and control the public. That's the reason why they have a euro. That's the reason why they have these unions set up that start as treaties for different reasons and then they become something bigger. They never ever thought that the EU would actually happen. It was a conspiracy theory until it actually did occur, and here we are today. They cannot withstand a Greece exit because they're not going to allow that to happen. Now, if it does, something else is going on here. Of course, they can change their plans at any day, but upon the creation of the EU, they knew that Greece was going to be a weaker country and would ultimately need to be bailed out in one way or another. So, if they allow it to fall out of there, there's something else going on. They've obviously extracted everything they needed to from Greece, and they sold off all their assets and all their islands and everything else, and they're done with it and they're moving on. So it's quite interesting to see where we'll go with this, but it's definitely not a certainty that they are able to withstand, at least for that near term, withstand something serious as one country leaving the Eurozone. Undoubtedly, it should be that it would seem stronger if they're able to just push away some of the weaker countries and just say, look, we don't have time for you. This is not working. Let's just move on. But we'll see where it goes. Now, this individual here, Michael Fuchs, said we shouldn't pump extra money into these states, but rather make sure they continue along the reform path. then he said, I'd be grateful if Mario Draghi would make the statements along these lines. Well, we know specifically that they're not going to reform any of these countries. When they talk about reform, all they're talking about is a reduction in the sovereignty of that nation, giving up everything they have, at the same time being forced onto crazy amounts of these actions that they do. So they basically say, look, you got to sell off a few of these islands. You have to now reform to these austerity measures, and so on and so forth. We've seen it take place a few years ago, and it's simply just going to continue. This is not being fixed because they are not reforming the nation properly. They say they have to reform, but it's always austerity measures. It's never something to actually fix the problem. So we'll move on to this right here. This is actually Mario Draghi saying this. In the euro area, stability and prosperity everywhere depend on countries thriving everywhere. So there's a strong case for sharing more sovereignty in this area. And when I read that, I had to do a double take and read it again. So I'll just do this for you here, where they said sharing more sovereignty in this area for building a genuine economic union. He talks a lot about this type of deal in here. I suggest you read it for yourself, but essentially what we're talking about is this union, the EU, being set up specifically to tear down the borders, and here he is actually saying that they want to share sovereignty. Well, sovereignty doesn't allow itself to be shared. That's the whole point of sovereignty. But of course, the EU is tearing those borders down. We see that happening right before our very eyes. And here's Mario Draghi coming forward and saying so. Look, you don't get the sovereignty you used to, and if you give up some of your sovereignty, everything is going to be fixed. That's what they do with the North American Union that they've talked about before, and then the other unions that they've mentioned. But it all starts off with these so-called Trans-Pacific partnerships and all these different treaties that are being set up that are really just there to be a Trojan horse for something much worse. Draghi prepares to act against the risk of deflation. The risk cannot be entirely excluded, but it is limited, Draghi said when asked if the region could enter a spiral of declining prices, falling wages, and postponed spending. We have to act against such risk. Well, just in case you didn't know, Mr. Draghi, this has already been occurring for years. So you should be printing money right now, because that's all you do. You don't reform anything. All you do is print money and send it out into the banking industry. At the same time, they perform austerity measures within the country in order to supposedly fix the problem. Not going to work. So we're going to move on right here to what I wrote about in my book, where I said a second round of bailouts for Greece is needed. Despite the billions given during the first round, it just wasn't enough. It will continue. I knew that a second round of bailouts and a third round of bailouts were going to be needed. I wrote about it in my book prior to it happening, simply because of its flawed design. If it needs one bailout, it's going to need more. You can't have a country like this to be in this union, because it's just not going to work. And in fact, even relatively strong countries together, it just won't work, because you have different laws and different people, different culture, all trying to fit in. But of course, when you have an elite set of technocrats sitting above all of these nations, what does any of it matter? Because the own countries don't even make their own laws in most cases. It's amazing to see how this is all happening. And this right here, the Germany 5-year bond actually dipping into the negative. We see this going on in other countries around the world where we have negative interest rates in one way or another. And here we are having the 5-year bond dip negative. This shows you right here that people are struggling to find an investment that is worth having, where they can actually give away negative rates and the investment companies will buy it up. Of course, in certain areas like the US, we see less countries buying up their debt, and we see more central banks having to foot the bill here. So it's really interesting to see that. UK manufacturing activity hits a 3-month low. This is out of the BBC. Just wanted to mention the fact that it's not just Greece, it's not just Germany that is affected by all this. The UK manufacturing going to a 3-month low at this point. And it's not just the UK. Global factory growth ends 2014 on low note. That's the PMI statistic showing you that out of Reuters. And we see that obviously when we have a slowdown, it's not just one country or one area. It's a global issue because of globalization, because of the failure of it. We see that it is declining undoubtedly, and this is going to make its way throughout the system. There is contagion here. They say there's no contagion, but of course it's pretty easy to see the contagion. We know that specifically. And this is just something that I'm connecting in. The energy-rich former Soviet Republic of Turkmenistan Thursday devalued its currency against the US dollar by 18% in the latest sign of contagion among Russia's neighbors from the plunging ruble. This is interesting to look at when you see how one country can devalue its currency in a dramatic way. Of course, they are devaluing it against the US dollar. This is a currency war that takes place because they want to be really attractive for exports, so they devalue their currency. This is something that China has been doing for quite a while. They're letting it come up a bit, but of course these countries that are really relying on their exports oftentimes need to devalue their currency in order to maintain their exports at their level. So we see how what they're doing, Turkmenistan, is no different than what all the other currencies around the world are doing. Even the Swiss did this against the euro, pegging it at 120 to the euro in order to stay competitive for the exports. We're going to see all sorts of devaluation occurring with countries around the world. Nothing has changed here. We will see the same things happening, and we will watch as it all declines and all crumbles to the ground. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to become a subscriber on the YouTube channel as we pass through 13,000 subscribers soon. And I thank you all for being here. Thank you for all your comments on yesterday's video. I truly appreciate that. And of course, if you're not already, it is very important to become an insider. That's where I give all my best intel for free. It's available at themoneygps.com. Just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.